As always, I have questions whenever I start a subject such as this, and sometimes I take just a moment or two to try to clarify some issues. And one of the issues that I was asked this morning was, well, I guess we shouldn't look for bargains then. Well, you have to understand what I'm trying to get at here. If you go into a store and you've got two things, and one has a cheaper price and it's the same thing, and okay, fine, that's well and good. If they offer a sale price and the like, that's fine. But sometimes you got to ask yourself, why is this product cheaper than this other product? We've discussed this before. If this product is cheaper because this company does not offer the same benefits perhaps that you have, it is cheaper because they don't pay their employees as much, they don't provide as much for them, they don't care as much for them, and thus their product is cheaper. Would you work under those circumstances? Would you want to work for it? Sometimes higher prices. Now, again, not always. That's what I'm saying. It's difficult to know nowadays because there are so many things going on with regard to governing prices. It's very difficult to discern. And you and I don't have the time to write each company and say, how do you treat your employees? Of course not. I don't have that kind of time. But you've got to begin asking yourself these questions simply because you're a Christian. And your life counts. What you do counts. And you must ask yourself because there is what's known as the golden rule. You do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So that's why we ask these questions. What I'm trying to address here is, again, I call it the feeding frenzy. It is trying to make the killing off the back of someone else. Trying to get something that is valuable for yourself cheaper and make somebody else take less money for it. Because you would not do that, and so therefore you go into a store and you begin buying, and all of a sudden now you believe in it. And I want to name that type of concept or attitude as holding selective philosophies. Okay, you have selective hearing. I know Stan is raising his hand back there. I know others, so sometimes I've had selective hearing. That just simply means you can hear it, but you only hear what you want to hear. Men are renowned for that at times. Selective hearing. But we embrace selective philosophies. And it has to do with the marketplace, business, and industry. Now, here we are on this side, and the us is labor. We're more communistic in our approach because we believe that the flow of wealth should go to us. We want more. And so therefore, we embrace that philosophy, often criticizing the management for not giving us what we're worth. Okay, and some of us are worth more or less, depending. But we embrace this philosophy. Hey, we're for the worker, and us are them. Now, we come over here, and all of a sudden, we want to buy something. We no longer are more communistic in our approach. Now, as I say this, more communistic, you have to understand that there are two sides to this issue. And over here is the capitalistic approach, where they want money flowing back to them as the capitalist without giving money or the minimal amount of money to their workers or care for their workers. But so we don't want that. We want benefits. We want money. We want the management to somehow love us and care for us. Okay. But now all of a sudden we come to a store. And we are now management. When you buy something, you're the boss. When you go in to make a purchase, though you don't see your employee, there is an employee behind every product that you buy. It's faceless usually, it's nameless usually. They're at the place you perhaps don't know unless you read the bottle where it comes from. But there is an employee who gets money off your purchase. You are now management. Now all of a sudden you switch philosophies. Oh, no, no, no. It's not the worker that should benefit. It's the one with the money. You become more capitalistic, and the flow of wealth goes from them, the worker, back to you. You want them to take less, and you want to get their product. And I'm saying selective philosophies is absolutely wrong. You need to reassess and reconsider the way that you are when you are labor and when you are management. Again, it's difficult because of the nature of our world. I had another question with regard to about buying a car from a foreign market, and I got to thinking about that because there was someone who said, and I've heard this said before from others. It's just not one person, but from others. Oh, you don't want to buy a car from a foreign company. And again, if I had my druthers, I would remain nationalistic to the core. I'm an American, and I want our country to prosper. But most probably, the person that said that, or persons that have said that, if you went in their home, they would have a Sony TV from Japan. They would have a sweatshirt made in Taiwan. They might have Michelin tires made in Germany and tennis shoes made in Korea. And then say, don't buy a foreign car because you're supporting the enemy. Now, that's where we are today. It's difficult because you go to a store and you just simply don't know unless you read the label where in the world they're coming from. And America doesn't make a lot of things anymore. We have gone from becoming an industrial country to a service-oriented country. Now you say, Pastor, what's wrong with that? When you begin being a service-oriented country and lose your industrial base, you're vulnerable to others who are industrialists. Because they can make the planes, and they can make the ships, and they can make the bombs. And when someone talked about Japan being the enemy, and that's for sure. That's what they tried to do the first time, is come over here and get America. And we beat them. But all of a sudden, they took our industry. I go back home to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and my heart is saddened. I could just cry because I look at literally hundreds of miles of steel mills up and down the Monongahela River, hundreds of miles of steel mills that are now the Rust Belt of America. Nobody gets any employment off of them. I have friends and family members who have been laid off years ago because people in America would not allow us to produce steel. It moved over to Japan, and we get our steel from them for the most part. And so that is a problem. If we go to right now, if we're in a war and we want to build a battleship, battleships are out, aren't they, Brother Gaskin? An aircraft carrier, a destroyer, support vessels on the sea. Guess where we have to go to get our steel? We have to go across the sea. But what if Japan becomes our enemy again? We are vulnerable. So I don't particularly like that. But what has happened is selective philosophies. We have to make a choice. Do we want clean air or do we want steel? And or is there a way to make our air cleaner as we're making our steel? But we're forfeiting our strength in favor of clean air. So we're going to have a lot of long-haired hippies running around here that are environmentalists. We're going to have a lot of clean air, and we're going to be speaking Chinese or Russian or Japanese, and that's nonsense. But anyway, that's where we are, and it's all a sign of the times. Now we're going to come back here to our violations. And again, we're picking on the capitalists. And we're in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. What do capitalists usually do? They violate, as we said this morning, the compensation ethic. And that's why I ask you to be mindful of your purchases. Because if you're trying to get something for nothing, more for less, at the expense of someone else, you're nothing more than a selfish, greedy capitalist that you blame corporations for being for laying off people, downsizing, not paying their employees, and so forth, because you become the corporation. Yes, you're only one, but that's still the point of capitalism here, acting in your own self-interest to the point of selfishness. That's where we disagree with them. So compensation, but it's also care. Think of the miners who have died because coal mine companies did not care. Think of all the laborers who laid railroad tracks in the early days of the railroad across the West, who died because companies placed their workers in dangerous situations and did not care. Life was cheap. And so, therefore, not only did they pay them a mere pennies a day, but they didn't care if they were hurt or maimed. And they didn't provide for the health care they needed if that were the case. And we say, yeah, great. All these people, the steel men, the railroad men, the coal men, have made their fortunes. But how did they make their fortunes? By not giving one bit of care to workers that should have had their attention and compassion. Note what Paul says here. Verse 7. Who goes to warfare any time at his own charges? Who plants a vineyard, eats not of the fruit thereof? Who feeds a flock and eats not of the milk of the flock? Say I these things as a man, nor saith the law the same thing also. Now that's a good verse for compensation, but now we're going to move down to the care ethic. It's in the law of Moses, and Paul quotes it as a valid principle for today. Thou shalt not muzzle the mouth of the ox that treadeth out the corn. Does God take care of oxen? And that's the point that we're making. Yes, incorporated in the law is not only compensation for his work, but care for him. I mean, you can't make this poor brute beast work all day without food, work in the hot sun without giving him a break and water, work him 7 days a week. That's why the law had the Sabbath day. You at least had to give your brute beast rest on that day, the complete day, so that they could recover and so forth. That's only right. That's care for the beast. Now, the point that he's making is that if God cares this way for beasts, obviously, he cares even greater for men. Does he say this for our sakes? For our sakes, no doubt. It's written, he that plows should plow in hope. He that thresheth in hope should be partaker of the hope. So that is called the Christian care ethic. But now, there are several other places in the Bible that talk about this. Come with me to Proverbs chapter 12. And that's why I ask you, with regard to your purchases, yes, it might be cheap, but where were these things produced? And do you care? Or is it just more important for you to have cheap commodities without the well-being of people in other parts of the world producing the things for mere pennies a day? Chapter 12, verse number 10. A righteous man regards the life of his beast. Now, the symbolism here that Paul was saying is a righteous man also cares for the life of his worker. That's what he's talking about. The beast works for him and he benefits from his labor. Therefore, the beast should be compensated and the beast should be cared for. If you don't care for the beast, you are not going to enjoy his labor very long because you're going to wear him out. Wear him down to a nub and he's just going to fall over and die. Then what are you going to do? But the tender mercies of the wicked are cruel. It's wicked people that keep driving and driving and driving their animals till they fall mercilessly, the Bible says. That's wrong. But people do that not just to beasts. People do that to other people. Have you ever been around a workaholic? Well, I have. And it's not wrong to have a good Christian work ethic. Not at all. But if they can't sleep, they're always driving themselves, but not only that, they're driving those around them nuts. And I've been there and I have done that. I'll not mention names as to who I've been around that is like that. But it's constantly the drive. Get it done. We got to do this. We got to do more. And you, yeah, okay, fine. No breaks, no vacation, and you're weary and you're tired and you're fatigued and you're brain dead and so forth. But there's heaps upon heaps of work to do. Well, we believe that is wrong. Matthew chapter 6, that there needs to be included in the work ethic time for rest. Matthew chapter 6, verse number 26. Now he's going to give two other illustrations here, one using animals and the other using plants. And what he's going to do is just simply this. It's a matter of value. When you come to birds and beasts and plants and the value of a human life, obviously these things are cheaper, more common, and the like. Human life is unique and important because it resolves the angelic conflict. It will go on for eternity, and it can make a decision for or against God. Human life is precious, not cheap. So, he gives the illustration and uses animals and plants, like Paul did, to illustrate or symbolize this point that God cares about these things, and if he cares about these things, then he's going to care about men so much more. That ought to be our attitude. Behold the fowls of the air, he said. They sow not, neither do they reap. They don't gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are not ye much better than they? Verse 28. Why take ye thought for raiment? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. Yet I say to you that even Solomon in all of his glory was not arrayed like one of these. So if God clothes the grass of the field, which today is and tomorrow is cast into the oven, shall he not much more clothe you, O ye of little faith? So here's the comparison. God's got his eye on all of creation. And if he cares about a sparrow that falls, if he's that much concerned with the birds, beasts, and flowers, obviously he is much more concerned about men and takes care for them. So that is the Bible care ethic. Now we're in Matthew here. Let's go to chapter 11. And verse number 28. And the last thing that we disagree with the capitalists is their lack of compassion. Because they, during the Industrial Revolution and even up to today, many people just simply don't care. We're coming into an era where there is not much care. They might say that they care, but actually there are always ulterior motives. Genuine Christian compassion and love is lacking. Okay, Matthew chapter 11 and verse number 28. Jesus Christ himself gives us an example of someone who wants compassion on another person that is heavy laden. He says to us, in effect, and we are carrying our sins. By the way, whenever I came under conviction for my sins, just around my 19th birthday, that's when I got saved. Just prior to that, I know what it felt to be under conviction. Now, I was raised around the river. I was raised around coal mines. I saw guys that worked hard, saw guys hauling railroad ties. I've seen people haul sacks of coal on their back, because I can go all the way back when I was little. We still had the coal furnaces and the like. Now I'm letting you know my age, but I've seen them hunched over. What am I saying? I'm saying that sin, in the very same way, can be burdensome, can be heavy. It weighs on your heart. It convicts you. But what's the answer? What's the solution? And so forth. And so you've got this big sack of dirty old coal on your back. And Jesus Christ is saying here, and the principle follows across the board. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I'll give you what? Rest. Rest for a person that truly has worked hard is an act of compassion. Hey, cut them a little slack. Give them a break. Give them a cup of cold water. Let them take a few moments off. Now again, if they're going to shirk, and we're going to get into Marxism here, shirkers and not workers, well, that's a different story. But we're talking about people who truly do the job. Jesus said, I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I'm meek and lowly in heart, and you'll find rest to your souls. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. Chapter 23 of Matthew. He doesn't like people who heap increasingly difficult burdens, laborious tasks on others, and yet are non-compassionate when it comes to trying to help them out. Verse 4. Speaking of the Pharisees, they bind heavy burdens, grievous to be borne, and they lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers. Yeah, you got to do this, you got to do the other, and it's more regulations, more, and heaping them on their backs until finally they don't know where to turn. They're afraid to do anything because they're going to be wrong and condemned by the Pharisees back then. If you got one of them mad, you could end up stoned and dead under a whole heap of stones. But the Pharisees would never really help them out in a compassionate move. That there were some things, some situations in life that needed to be looked at in certain ways, and people needed to be helped with their burdens. Okay? Let's go back to Zechariah. We want to move on here a little bit into Marxism, and by the brilliance of the lightning out there, we want to be moving to lower ground. I don't know. Zechariah chapter 7 and verse number 7. This will be the last verse, biblically proving compassion. Should you not hear the words which the Lord hath cried by the former prophets, when Jerusalem was inhabited and in prosperity, and the cities round about her, when men inhabited the south and the plain? The word of the Lord came to Zechariah, saying, Thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, execute true judgment. In other words, do what's right. That's what true judgment is. Discern what is right in this case of management and labor, and execute it, showing mercy and compassion every man to his brother. Compassion is built into the Christian way of life as an attitude toward others who are heavy laden and are being driven and are at their point of exhaustion, and cutting them a break is the thing to do. So again, that people will not think that I'm trying to go one side to the other and all this. I am not. There is a middle ground that is the biblical position with regard to management and labor. Though we agree with Smith on this matter of volition and self-interest, we only go so far. It's not selfish interest. It's compensating those who truly work. It's caring about them, their families, their work-related conditions, and being compassionate when they have exhausted themselves for us, and cut them some slack so that they might be able to recover. Give them some needed time off or rest. Okay, let's move from this point over then to Marxism. Turn with me to 2 Thessalonians. Second Thessalonians, chapter 3. Now, I mentioned this morning as I gave the first Bible principle, the workaday world is biblically divided into two categories. Now, Marx divided them into management and labor, but he called them the bourgeoisie and the proletariats. The first is that of the owners or capitalists, the other that of the workers. And he wanted a proletariat revolt. Now, we got the definition of what a master was. Here's what a servant is, and that's something Marx did not want to be. And you see, the minute you enter the minute you become saved, the next step is the Christian way of life. And what's the first thing you have to become in order to execute the Christian way of life? A servant. Lucifer doesn't want to serve. Lucifer wanted to revolt against Jesus Christ, and he wanted to be top dog and everybody serve him. But when Jesus Christ came to the earth, what did he say? I came not to be ministered unto, I came to what? Be a minister. He said, the one that's greatest among you is what? Servant of all. He taught that, yes, though he was God and King of the universe, and he deserved worship and praise and obedience from servants, that it was not too much for him to become a servant himself. In fact, the book of Philippians tells us that he took the form of a man and the form of a servant, humbling himself to the cross, and that's how God highly exalted him. That's how he got his promotion, and that's how he got his prosperity. How? By kneeling down to God the Father and saying, not my will, thine be done. That's a servant. And it is the word doulos, one who gives himself up and over to a greater or lesser degree, depending, to another's ownership and will. Now that's something Marx did not want to have, and there's where we differ with him. We appreciate his concern about workers. Yes, we take to task Smith on this. But you've got to understand, and we will study this not tonight, but eventually, that when God created, he created a hierarchy. Can you name for me the 7 levels of angelic powers and thrones, going all the way from rank and file angels and so forth? Name, dominion, might, principalities, powers, and the anointed cherub. I think that was 5 of them. Rank and file, name, dominion, might, principalities, or powers rather, principalities, and the anointed cherub. And then, of course, above him, the anointed cherub was the anointed Christ in eternity past. And then above the anointed Christ was the Father. He was on the throne over all. So, when God created, what did he create? A hierarchy. What is a hierarchy? It's where people are listed over and under in accordance with their rank and function and office. That's how God created the universe, with people over and under other people, or in that case, beings called angels. And that's what it's going to be in eternity future. What is Jesus Christ going to be? King. What does that mean? He's the absolute sovereign, not just of this earth, but of the universe. We better get used to this idea. Marx never did get used to it, because he didn't want anybody telling him what to do. And that's bad. Now, as a result, you get from this modern liberalism and the welfare state and people getting paid for doing nothing. And here's where we take that kind of idea to task. The Christian, not Protestant. We're not Protestant. The biblical work ethic. Where do we find it? 2 Thessalonians chapter 3. Verse number 10. For even when we were with you, this we commanded you. Not an option up to for grabs. That if any would not work, neither should he eat. Plain and simple. Dispensation of grace. You are a lazy, no good for nothing bum that you just simply don't want to have anything to do with just with regard to that. Paul said, okay, that's enough, and that's what he's talking about here. And if you don't work, you shouldn't eat. For we hear that there are some that walk among you disorderly, working not at all, but are busybodies. Now, why did they become busybodies? Because they had too much time on their hands. They got into things that they shouldn't, rather than being productive in the Lord's work. That's the work ethic here. Okay? Let's go back to Proverbs chapter 13. By the way, we could go back to Genesis, but we've been back there so much I don't want to go there. But what was the curse on man with regard to the fall? By the sweat of your brow, you're going to earn your bread. And so what Marx did, he wanted to beat the curse through the welfare state. Proletariat revolt. Chapter 13, verse number 4. The soul of the sluggard desires, but it has nothing. But the soul of the diligent shall be made fat. All right? Let's go to chapter 20 in the same book. Verse number 4. Now here's a good one because it indicates somewhat of an adverse working condition. With the way things are getting in some cases, not all of course, but in some, workers want to be really pampered. And here's what it says. The sluggard will not plow by reason of the cold. Ew, it's too cold for me to get up behind this plow this morning. I'll just turn on the radio and get under the covers and sleep the morning through. Therefore shall he beg in harvest and have nothing. So we're talking about a work ethic here. All right, now let's go from this one to chapter 21, verse 25. Proverbs 21:25. The desire of the slothful kills him, for his hands refuse to labor. He covets greedily all the day long, but the righteous give and spare not. So, what we're saying here, what the Bible is saying here, is simply that there are people who don't want to work, and yet they want to be paid. Let's move on to another one, chapter 22, verse number 29. Follow with me. Seest thou a man diligent in his business? He shall stand before kings. He shall not stand before mean. Now the word mean there is common men. Aristocracy. Now aristocracy means that common men have high standards of life. They may not ever sit in a throne this side of glory, but they have high standards for their life. Doing God's will means that you are an aristocrat. You've been born into the royal family of God, but it takes more than that to be an aristocrat in life. It takes learning the word and living it out, and that's aristocracy. We have higher standards than mean men or common men, and living like that means you're an aristocrat. And that's what it says here. Promotion and prosperity come from God. And that comes from being diligent in his business. The word study to show yourself approved unto God. You know what it translates out in the Greek? Be diligent. Be faithful to the task. Get in there and put your nose to the grindstone. Put on your bifocals. Read it out. Seest thou a man diligent in his business? He'll stand before kings. God will promote him. The system will promote him. And if the system fails you, by your still doing right, eventually God will promote you. You'll get your comeuppance. Chapter 24 and verse number 30. Now, stay with me, because we're now going to go from the Old Testament into the writings of Paul. Lest somebody say, well, now, Pastor, you're just sticking to the Old Testament. That's law. Under grace, we don't have to be so conscientious with regard to a work ethic. Well, I just read you from 2 Thessalonians. Guess who wrote that book? Paul. And that's where we get the work ethic. All right. Chapter 24, verse 30. I went by the field of the sluggard, by the vineyard of the man void of understanding. It was grown over with thorns and nettles that covered the face thereof, and the stone wall thereof was broken down. I saw and considered it well, and looked upon it, and I received instruction. Here's what happened. A little sleep, little slumber, whiling away the day, little folding of the hands to sleep, snooze here, snooze there. So shall thy poverty come as one that travaileth, and thy want as an armed man. In other words, it's going to eventually be taken from you. It's going to diminish through sheer attrition. Now let's go to the writings of Paul. 3 portions here, and we'll move on. Romans chapter 12. So, applying yourself productively to even what might be termed a carnal task, a worldly task, having a job, doing your best at it as to the Lord, is part of your Christian life and Christian obligation. And that's what Paul is saying here. Verse number 11, not slothful in business. If you're going to be a Christian and you want a testimony in front of your co-workers, you can't be one that doesn't want to do your part. Not slothful in business. Fervent in spirit. Now, oh yeah, when I come to church and we sing and well, I'm really fervent in spirit. Mind you the context of this. Fervent in spirit means you like to go to work. Now, sometimes that's difficult, but it means that you pack your lunch and you get in behind with the other 7 dwarfs in the line, and you whistle while you're going to work. All right, that's what it means. Fervent in spirit. You get excited. Why? Because this is how I'm going to keep the wolf from the door, and so forth. Now that is hard, but liking your work and doing it as to the Lord is important. Fervent in spirit. What does that apply to? It applies to your job. And last part of verse number 11, because in the business you're actually serving the Lord. Now here is the good part. You do a good job under the filling of the Holy Spirit, and not only does it mean again, relatively speaking, this side of glory, that you're going to be rewarded here. But you not only do a good job here, but guess where else you get to be rewarded? Bema Seat. When you put it in that light, that you are doing at your job as to the Lord, that means that what you do now is going to be compensated one more time in eternity. It's double blessing. It's blessing here because God is going to sustain you through this means, but then you're going to stand before the Bema Seat and he's going to say, well done, thou good and faithful servant. You served me. Where, Lord? On the job. People looked at you and they saw a Christ likeness. You had an impact in history and on that workplace and in the lives of these people. Or what? Or another kind of impact? I don't know. Are you getting uncomfortable because the lightning is as bright as the sun? I don't know. We're close to being done here, so stick with me. But that's the work ethic. Being happy about going to the job is important, because once you enter the workplace and you get around other people, what aren't they about their job? Happy. That's right. There is more griping and complaining and the like. And that's not saying that from time to time you can't think in your mind, boy, they sure are being stubborn about all of this. But showing them through the likeness of Christ, through your circumstances, is what it's all about. Two more portions. I do believe we've got enough time. Ephesians 4. This is a true story. I once heard a black preacher, and he was preaching up a storm. He had the Baptist bark and everything else. It's Ephesians chapter 4, verse number 28. And he got to go in here on this, and the first part of this says, "Let him that stole steal no more, rather let him labor, working with his hands." And he got his tongue all tangled. This is true story. And he put the brakes in the grammar a little different place. He said, "Let him that stole steal, no more working with his hands." He got to looking at it, and oh no. He said, "I didn't mean to say that, but that's how it came out. Let him that stole steal, no more working with his hands." Okay. But that's not what Paul is saying. You at one time stole. That's how you were making your living. But there's different ways to steal. Management, not paying your employees their just due. Workers, not putting in the time and spending your time rather griping and complaining and the like. Let him that stole steal no more, but rather let him labor. This is the work ethic. Working with his hands, the thing which is good, that he might have to give to him that needeth. Now, you take care of your family. You take care of your ever-loving pastor by having money in your pocket. You take care of the wolf at the door and the like. If you don't have this means, then you can't do this. And so that's why there is a work ethic. Okay, let's move on to one last portion. We just have a minute. Ephesians chapter 4. First Thessalonians chapter 4. I'll still back on, let him that stole steal. No more working with them hands. 3 minutes and 2 verses. A comment and we're done. 1 Thessalonians 4:11. Paul's exhortation to us. That you study, learn how to be quiet, not silent, but the quietness is in relation to the job, doing all things without murmurings and complaining. So that is difficult at times. I'm glad he didn't say anything about groanings, because I've groaned in my spirit lots. To do your own business, take care of yourself, be self-reliant, to work with your own hands as we commanded you. Why? That you might walk honestly toward them that are without. Who are they? Those are unbelievers. And that is how you have a testimony in the workplace. You're honest by doing your work, and that ye may have lack of nothing. Though God will provide through his riches and glory, he also provides through honest labor, putting in the time, good attitudes, doing your best. That is the work ethic.